You know a case has gone nuclear when it stops being just a courtroom story and turns into a full-blown internet bloodbath. Because right now, this Lil Durk case is not living in one place anymore. It's not just in the filings. It's not just in the courtroom. It's not just in the headlines. It's everywhere at once, in live stream clips, in reaction channels, in group chats, in blog captions, in legal breakdowns, and in those late-night conversations where people swear they've figured out the whole case before trial even starts. And then DJ Akademiks and Wack100 stepped into the smoke. And that's when this whole thing went from serious case to what in the world are we really looking at? Because once those two start talking, the temperature changes. It's no longer just, what do the feds say? Now it becomes, what are they not saying? It's no longer just, what's in the indictment? Now it becomes, what's the bigger story the internet thinks it sees behind the indictment? And suddenly, the wildest theories start flying. Was this about retaliation? Was there pressure inside the streets after Vaughn? Were people being watched, tested, or blamed? And then the most explosive question of all detonates across YouTube thumbnails and comment sections. Were there really broader hits being discussed, even around O-Block? Now let's be very clear. That is the kind of shock claim and online speculation that blows up in commentary spaces, not a proven courtroom fact. But once that kind of question enters the air, the damage is already done. Because now the public isn't just following a case. They're following a mystery, a conspiracy, a storyline, a war over narrative. And that is exactly why this story is so dangerous. Because while prosecutors are trying to build one picture, commentators are tearing open another. While defense lawyers are trying to fight evidence in court, the internet is building its own version of events in real time. While official filings talk about motive, organization, jury issues, and alleged witness pressure, the streets and the content world are turning that into something even darker. A giant web of alleged revenge politics, loyalty tests, and hidden pressure points that may or may not ever be proven in court. So tonight, we're breaking it all down. Not the lazy version. Not the clickbait version. The real rap news version. What Akademiks actually seem to be saying. Why Wack100 style pours gasoline on every rumor. Why this O-Block angle has people panicking. Why the anonymous jury talk matters. Why severance matters. Why the prosecution's image of Durk as a boogeyman matters. And why this case is starting to feel less like a single prosecution and more like a public war over who gets to define the truth before the jury ever hears a word. Because if you thought this was just another hip-hop legal story, no. This one is turning into a culture-wide pressure cooker. And the worst part? It feels like we still haven't seen the biggest twist yet. Let's start with the first thing that makes this entire story so explosive. There are now two different trials happening at the same time. There's the real trial, the one in federal court. And then there's the internet trial, the one happening on streams, podcasts, reaction channels, and timelines. And if we're being honest, the internet trial is moving faster. That's where DJ Akademiks becomes such a major factor in this whole conversation. Because AK doesn't just report a case like a news anchor. He doesn't just read a filing and move on. He turns the filing into a live event. He takes dry court language and translates it into drama, into stakes, into winners and losers, into this means the feds are scared, or this means the defense sees a weakness, or this means somebody is trying to flip the whole board. That style is exactly why so many people lock into his Durk coverage. And in the clip you referenced, what made his breakdown hit so hard is that he wasn't just reading paperwork. He was building a larger theory around it. A theory that the government is not simply prosecuting Durk. It is allegedly trying to present him as such a dangerous, influential, uncontrollable figure that the court has no choice but to keep him boxed in, isolated, and treated like a walking threat to the entire judicial process. That's a huge framing move. Because once you sell the public on that, every filing suddenly feels sinister. Every government motion feels strategic. Every request for extra protection feels like part of a bigger campaign. Anonymous jury. Not just procedure. Now it feels like fear. Witness intimidation references. Not just argument. Now it feels like the government is painting a monster. Media coverage. Not just attention. Now it feels like perception warfare. And this is exactly where a case breakdown starts gripping people. Because he's essentially telling viewers, don't just read what the feds filed. Ask yourself what image they're trying to create. That's catnip for an audience that already distrusts the system. And once the audience buys into the idea that the government is trying to turn Durk into the ultimate boogeyman, everything else starts getting interpreted through that lens. So when the feds reportedly push for an anonymous jury, people don't hear jury management. They hear, they want the jury terrified. When prosecutors mention threats, intimidation, or the scale of media attention, people don't hear risk assessment. They hear, they want the judge to think this is bigger than it is. When supporters and commentators say the government is criminalizing lyrics and image, the case stops feeling like it's about evidence alone. It starts feeling like it's about who gets to define rap itself, art, confession, propaganda, or prejudice. And once that happens, you don't have a normal case anymore. You have a cultural war. Now let's bring Wack100 into the picture. Because Wack's role in a story like this is different from AK's. AK tends to be the guy reading documents, reacting to filings, piecing together what he thinks the legal strategy might be, and translating legalese into internet language. Wack100, on the other hand, thrives in that gray zone between insider energy, street mythology, confrontation, and shock value commentary. He doesn't cool a story down. He accelerates it. He says the thing that makes the room freeze. He leans into the angle that sounds too crazy not to click. That's why when names like Akademiks and Wack100 appear in the same title next to a case this sensitive, people automatically assume there's some hidden layer being exposed. Not necessarily because there is, but because those personalities are built to make it feel that way. And that brings us to the most radioactive part of this entire topic. The online theory that the case may connect to broader revenge politics, loyalty expectations, and alleged fallout involving people around O-Block. Let me say this clearly again, that is internet speculation, not established fact. But if you want to understand why it spread so fast, you have to understand the emotional engine powering all of it. King Von. Von's death hangs over this story like a storm cloud that never moved on. Whether you're looking at public reporting about motive, lyric disputes, fan commentary, or street-level internet theories, everything keeps circling back to the same emotional center. What happened after Von died? Who was expected to respond? Who didn't? Who got blamed? Who got close? Who got distant? And whether retaliation culture became a pressure system all its own. That's why the phrase, "slide for Von," became so symbolically powerful in this case discussion. Because once prosecutors publicly tie certain lyrics to alleged motive, the internet does what the internet always does. It expands. It doesn't stop at the official allegation. It starts building a whole world around it. And in that world, people begin asking questions like, if retaliation was the alleged motive, who all was caught in that emotional blast radius? If public image and private expectations collided, did that create pressure on people around Durk? If there were loyalty conversations behind the scenes, who got labeled solid and who got labeled weak? If a culture of revenge was part of the backdrop, could the internet be seeing a much larger map than the one the courtroom is officially showing? These are exactly the kinds of questions that create a viral title like, "Hits on O-Block Ordered?" Because it's not really just one claim. It's a bundle of fears wrapped into one headline. Fear that the case is wider than people thought. Fear that internal politics may have mattered more than fans realized. Fear that street mythology, rap branding, real grief, and legal exposure may have all collided in one ugly place. Fear that the internet might be sniffing around something dark, but with no way to prove where the line is between fact, rumor, exaggeration, and fantasy. And that's what makes this such dangerous content. Because commentary can be seductive. Once someone sounds confident enough, viewers start confusing possibility with proof. Now, one of the biggest reasons a case breakdown resonated is because he focused heavily on strategy. Not just what happened, but why would each side move this way? That is where his analysis gets sticky. For example, in the clip, he strongly leaned into the idea that Durk may have preferred a faster trial because, in his view, prosecutors might not yet have every cooperator or every link they need. He contrasted that with co-defendants or alleged participants who might benefit from delays, suppression fights, or separate strategies. Whether that theory proves right or not, it gives viewers a framework. Maybe delay helps the government more than the defense. Maybe time is not neutral. Maybe every postponed date is a chance for the feds to keep tightening the net. That kind of framing electrifies an audience, because now the calendar itself feels dramatic. A delay is no longer just a delay. It becomes, who does this really help? Then AK moves into the severance issue, especially the argument that if one defendant gets separated from the rest, the government may have a harder time using the connective tissue of a conspiracy theory across everybody all at once. Again, whether you agree with his breakdown or not, the audience hears something very powerful. Maybe one legal move could weaken the whole architecture. Maybe one separation could force prosecutors to prove pieces of the story more directly instead of relying on a giant combined narrative. And once you combine that with all the public chatter around who knew who allegedly recruited who, and how far the government can stretch the conspiracy framing, the public starts feeling like the entire case might depend on a few fragile links. That is how a legal discussion becomes binge-worthy. Now let's talk about the anonymous jury issue, because this is a huge part of why people started saying the government was trying to present Durk as extraordinarily dangerous. The basic public-facing idea is simple. Prosecutors reportedly wanted an anonymous jury because of the seriousness of the case, the media attention around it, and alleged intimidation concerns. On paper, that can be argued as a security measure. But in the world of commentary, that same move gets translated differently. It becomes symbolic. It becomes, the government wants the jury hidden because they want everybody to believe Durk's orbit is too powerful and too risky. That framing matters because juries aren't just legal tools in the public imagination. They're emotional symbols. If the jury has to be protected, then the defendant starts looking bigger, darker, and more frightening in the eyes of the audience, whether that impression is fair or not. And that's where AK's boogeyman language lands. He's essentially arguing that the state benefits from making Durk feel not just accused, but terrifying. Not just charged, but untouchable. Not just connected to a case, but connected to an entire atmosphere of fear. And once that picture gets painted, even ordinary procedural moves start feeling like part of a psychological operation. Now step back and look at what the audience is absorbing all at once. A famous rapper. A federal case. Retaliation allegations. Lyrics being used in court. Anonymous jury talk. Witness pressure arguments. Multiple defendants. Severance strategy. Massive media attention. Street names floating around online. O-Block entering the rumor machine. Akademiks reading filings live. Wack100 throwing fuel on every possible angle. That's not a normal news cycle. That is a perfectly engineered attention machine. And the reason it hits so hard is because every side of the story offers a different emotional payoff. If you distrust the government, the payoff is their overreaching and criminalizing image. If you believe the government's theory, the payoff is the lyrics, the motive, the circle, the structure, it all points somewhere. If you live in commentary culture, the payoff is there's way more going on behind the scenes than the public knows. And if you just love drama, the payoff is this could be one of the wildest rap trials in years. That's why the O-Block angle spreads even without hard confirmation. Because it satisfies the internet's appetite for the darkest possible version of the story. But here's the part most channels don't slow down enough to say. The fact that a rumor is emotionally believable to viewers does not make it legally true. The fact that a theory sounds like it fits the streets does not mean it fits the evidence. The fact that a commentator can connect dots on a stream does not mean prosecutors can connect those same dots beyond a reasonable doubt in court. That distinction matters. And it matters even more in a case where music, persona, grief, loyalty, branding, and criminal allegations are all colliding. Now let's zoom in on another big reason the internet won't let this go. Rap cases involving lyrics always create double vision. One side hears bars and sees art. The other side hears bars and sees motive. One side says, this is performance. The other says, this sounds too specific. One side says, they're criminalizing creativity. The other says, if the lyrics line up with the allegations, why should they be ignored? That debate is already explosive on its own, and public reporting shows the court didn't just blindly allow everything. Some lyrics were allowed, others were blocked, and the debate over prejudice versus relevance became central. Now add commentary channels into that. What happens? The lyrics stop being evidence and start becoming content. People quote them in thumbnails. They stitch them into theories. They use them as emotional glue between public allegations and internet mythology. And now the viewer is no longer just listening to a song or reading a filing. They are being invited to decode a whole underworld. That decoding impulse is exactly why titles like this one pop so hard. Because it promises not just facts, it promises access. It tells the viewer, you thought you knew the case, but these guys just exposed the hidden layer. That is incredibly powerful storytelling. But it also means the creator has a responsibility not to collapse allegation into certainty. Which is why a YouTube-safe version of this topic has to stay disciplined. You can say, Akademiks suggested, Wack100 implied. Commentary channels are pushing. Online speculation exploded around. Viewers started wondering whether. The internet took this as a sign that. That is fair commentary framing. What you cannot do responsibly is pretend those shock theories are already established facts when they are not. And ironically, that caution makes the script better, not weaker. Because the uncertainty is the hook. The uncertainty is what makes people stay. The uncertainty is what makes the story feel alive. If everything were already proven, it wouldn't be a mystery. It would just be a recap. Now let's talk about Brian Steele for a second, because his arrival changes how people hear all of this. Public reporting confirmed that Brian Steele joined Durk's defense team, and because Steele became such a major symbol in the Young Thug case, his name now carries an almost mythic feeling in rap legal discourse. The moment Steele enters the picture, fans stop thinking, can Durk survive this? And start thinking, what is the defense really planning? And once that happens, every government move gets reinterpreted as something that may be challenged, narrowed, dismantled, or exposed as overreach. So in the eyes of the audience, the story becomes a chess match. Government says anonymous jury. Defense may say prejudice theater. Government says conspiracy structure. Defense may say guilt by association. Government says lyrics show motive. Defense may say art is being weaponized. Government says this is a dangerous network. Defense may say you're criminalizing image, loyalty, and public branding. That clash is why the public keeps circling back to content like Akademiks and Wack100's discussion. Because the audience isn't just looking for updates. They're looking for signs that the narrative can still flip. And that is the most important word in this whole story. Flip. Can the case flip? Can public opinion flip? Can one legal motion flip the tone? Can one severance argument flip the connective tissue theory? Can one witness issue flip the government's confidence? Can one commentator clip flip millions of people from Durk is done to wait, maybe the feds don't have this as locked up as they want us to think? That's the emotional roller coaster people are riding. Now let's address the darker side of this content, because every huge rap trial eventually develops one. The audience starts performing certainty. People start talking like they were in the room. They say, oh yeah, this person definitely flipped. This person definitely told. This proves everything. This connects all the dots. He's cooked. He's beating it. This was ordered. That was payback. This block was involved. That crew was targeted. And the truth is, most of them are building castles out of partial information, secondhand commentary, edited clips, and vibes. That doesn't mean nothing matters. It means everything has to be weighed carefully. Because in a case like this, the internet's greatest talent is turning fragments into mythology. And once mythology takes over, everyone becomes convinced the hidden story is more real than the official one. Sometimes the official story really is incomplete. Sometimes the commentary catches something important. Sometimes the government overreaches. Sometimes the public underestimates the evidence. Sometimes a big-name commentator asks the right question. Sometimes he asks the most clickable one. And right now, that's exactly where this Durk conversation lives. Between fear and fascination. Between evidence and atmosphere. Between legal filings and street folklore. Between what the feds are trying to prove and what the internet is desperate to believe. So when people say, DJ Akademiks and Wack100 exposed the case, what they often really mean is this. They exposed how unstable the public understanding of the case actually is. They exposed how many people already believe there are multiple hidden layers. They exposed how quickly a federal case can become a Crowd D conspiracy board. They exposed how easy it is for the public to start reading every motion as a clue to some bigger unseen map. And they exposed something else too. No matter what happens in court, this case is already a war over perception. That war is happening right now. It's happening in every clip, every title, every reaction, every rumor, every heard from every somebody from the camp said. if you read between the lines. And that is why this story feels so huge. Because it's no longer just about guilt or innocence in the abstract. It's about whether the system is fairly reading a rapper, or whether the internet is wildly rewriting the case faster than the court can process it. And that's what makes this one of the most gripping stories in rap media right now. Not because all the claims are proven, but because the uncertainty itself is addictive. Because everybody senses there's more beneath the surface. And because every time a figure like Akademiks or Wack100 starts talking, people feel like the smoke just got thicker. So now I want to know what you think. Did Akademiks and Wack100 actually expose anything real here? Or did they do what the internet does best? Take a real case, mix it with legal strategy, street mythology, public grief, and pure speculation, then turn it into the most explosive possible storyline. Do you think the government is genuinely building a strong case? Or do you think they're trying to shape Durk into a larger-than-life villain before the jury even hears everything? And what about that O-block angle? Is that just a perfect example of how rumors mutate online? Or do you think those commentary spaces are hinting at a bigger layer the public still doesn't understand? Drop your take in the comments. Was this a real expose? A narrative war? A media smokescreen? Or a sign that this case is way more complicated than the headlines make it look? If you want, I can also do 2 more versions of this next. Version 2, a harder, more aggressive say cheese / viral blog style script. Version 3, a clean documentary style YouTube script with calmer narration, smoother transitions, and retention focused pacing. If you want the next one, just say, do the documentary version, or make it even more savage.